Welcome back, everyone. We're glad to have you here with us. Tonight, we return to the Nevada desert, to a place where the line between fact and fiction blurs like heat shimmer on summer tarmac, Groom Lake, Area 51. The most classified patch of Earth in America, where black projects emerge from shadow and disappear just as quickly. What secrets rest beneath those hangars? What moves through the restricted airspace when the desert sleeps? You've heard the stories of alien craft and recovered technology. But tonight, we explore the deeper mystery, the human side of the legend, the engineers, test pilots, and security personnel who've glimpsed something extraordinary in the Nevada wilderness. Share your thoughts in the comments. What do you believe happens behind those fences when the world isn't watching? Now, let's step into the classified world of Groom Lake, where black projects are born and secrets never leave. Chapter 1: The Black Site That Doesn't Exist. For more than half a century, the United States government perfected the art of making something invisible while hiding it in plain sight. Area 51, Groom Lake, call it what you will, existed as the most advanced aerospace facility on Earth while officially not existing at all. Picture this. You're looking at a map of Nevada in 1960. Your finger traces the highways, the towns, the military installations clearly marked with official symbols. But there, in the vast emptiness north of Las Vegas, where Groom Lake should appear, there's nothing, just blank desert, no roads leading anywhere important, no facilities marked, no acknowledgement that hundreds of the world's most brilliant engineers and test pilots report to work there every morning. This wasn't an oversight, it was policy, carefully crafted and ruthlessly maintained by a bureaucratic machine designed to keep secrets. The legal framework that protected Groom Lake's invisibility began in 1955, when the Atomic Energy Commission withdrew the land from public use. Later, presidential orders expanded the restricted zone, each expansion swallowing more of the surrounding desert into a buffer of absolute control. At the heart of this system was a simple principle: what doesn't officially exist cannot be questioned, investigated, or exposed. Congressional oversight committees couldn't ask about budgets for a facility that wasn't on any official books. Journalists couldn't file Freedom of Information Act requests about operations at a base the government refused to acknowledge. Even within the military, most personnel had no idea what their colleagues were working on just a few hundred miles away. The geography itself became an accomplice to this secrecy. Groom Lake sits in a natural bowl, surrounded by ridges and mountains that block views from nearly every direction. The nearest public road is miles away, and even from the highest accessible peaks, the base appears as little more than a collection of distant buildings shimmering in the desert heat. This isolation wasn't accidental. When the CIA first surveyed potential locations for their most sensitive aircraft testing, they needed somewhere that satellites couldn't easily photograph, where foreign agents couldn't establish observation posts, and where the nearest curious civilian was too far away to see anything meaningful. But geographical isolation was only the beginning. Above Groom Lake, the air itself was locked down tighter than any other piece of American sky. Restricted Area 4808 North, as it's officially designated, creates an invisible dome of forbidden airspace stretching from the surface to unlimited altitude. Civilian pilots who stray too close receive immediate warnings from air traffic control. Those who ignore the warnings find themselves intercepted by military aircraft and escorted to the nearest airport for questioning. The enforcement isn't subtle. Radar installations throughout the region track every aircraft within hundreds of miles. Any deviation toward the restricted zone triggers an automatic response. Radio frequencies are monitored constantly. Even private planes flying well outside the boundary report being contacted by controllers who somehow know exactly who they are and where they're going. On the ground, the security apparatus extends far beyond the base itself. Motion sensors buried in the desert floor detect footsteps from remarkable distances. Cameras mounted on hidden poles watch every approach route. And then there are the guards, the infamous camo dudes who appear seemingly from nowhere whenever someone ventures too close to the boundary. They're polite but firm, armed but not threatening, unless you give them reason to be. The legal authority behind all this comes from a web of classifications, executive orders, and national security directives that most Americans have never heard of. The base operates under what's known as a Special Access Program, a level of classification so restrictive that even having a top-secret clearance doesn't guarantee you'll ever know it exists. Workers at Groom Lake don't just sign non-disclosure agreements. They enter a world where the very mention of their workplace could result in decades in federal prison. This bureaucratic invisibility created a perfect storm for speculation. Nature abhors a vacuum, and in the absence of official information, rumors rushed in to fill the void. If the government was spending billions of dollars on something they refused to acknowledge, it had to be extraordinary. And in the 1980s and 90s, as UFO sightings increased around the Nevada desert, many people reached an obvious conclusion. The secrecy wasn't protecting advanced aircraft. It was hiding something far more revolutionary. The irony is that the cover-up succeeded too well. By creating such elaborate secrecy around their aircraft testing programs, intelligence agencies inadvertently created the perfect breeding ground for UFO mythology. Every strange light in the Nevada sky became a potential alien craft. Every denied FOIA request became evidence of a cover-up extending beyond mere military technology. Even the name Area 51 entered popular culture through leaked documents and insider testimony, not official acknowledgement. For decades, officials would neither confirm nor deny that such a designation existed. When pressed by reporters, they would refer only to a testing facility or decline to comment on operational details. The workers themselves became part of the invisibility machine. Transported to the base on unmarked aircraft from Las Vegas, they lived double lives. To their families and neighbors, they worked for generic aerospace contractors or government agencies. The specific details of their days remained locked away, sometimes for decades after retirement. But nothing stays hidden forever. By the 2000s, satellite imagery made it impossible to deny that something significant was happening in the Nevada desert. Commercial satellites could photograph the runways, hangars, and expanding infrastructure. The base's existence became an open secret, acknowledged by everyone except the government that built it. The formal acknowledgement, when it finally came in 2013, felt almost anticlimactic. After decades of denials, the CIA simply released documents confirming what researchers had known all along. Area 51 was real. It had been used to test the U-2 spy plane and other classified aircraft. The revelation answered old questions while raising new ones about what other secrets might still be buried in the desert. Today, the bureaucratic machinery of secrecy continues to operate around Groom Lake, even as its existence is no longer denied. New projects remain classified, new aircraft continue to be tested, and somewhere in the Nevada desert, engineers and test pilots still report to work at a facility that, officially, specializes in things the public isn't allowed to know. Chapter 2: Birth of the U-2 Dragon Lady. In 1955, a small team of CIA officials and Lockheed engineers stood in the Nevada desert, squinting against the harsh sun as they surveyed a dry lake bed that would soon become the birthplace of America's most secret aircraft. They were looking for the perfect place to test something the world had never seen before. A plane that could fly higher than any other, carrying cameras deep into Soviet airspace to photograph military installations hidden behind the Iron Curtain. The man leading this effort was Clarence Kelly Johnson, the legendary designer whose Skunk Works division at Lockheed had already produced some of the fastest aircraft in the world. But this new project, designated the U-2, would push the boundaries of flight in an entirely different direction. Instead of speed, it would climb to altitudes where the air was so thin that conventional engines couldn't function and where a pilot's blood would boil without a pressure suit. Groom Lake offered everything Johnson needed. The dry lake bed stretched for miles in every direction, flat and hard enough to serve as a runway for experimental aircraft. Mountains surrounded the basin, creating natural barriers against prying eyes. Most importantly, it was isolated. The nearest town was hours away by rough desert roads, and the restricted airspace meant no curious civilian pilots would accidentally witness test flights. The CIA had chosen this location with surgical precision. They needed a place where the most sensitive intelligence-gathering aircraft in American history could be developed without foreign agents learning of its existence. The Soviet Union was racing to perfect intercontinental ballistic missiles, and American intelligence desperately needed to know how close they were to deployment. Satellite surveillance didn't exist yet. The only way to peer behind the Iron Curtain was to fly over it. Construction began almost immediately. Temporary buildings rose from the desert floor. A runway was graded and paved across the lake bed. Housing was erected for the test crews who would spend months in the Nevada wilderness. Everything was designed to be functional rather than permanent, as if the entire operation might need to disappear on short notice. The first U-2 arrived at Groom Lake in July of 1955, transported in sections and reassembled in a makeshift hangar. When mechanics rolled it into the sunlight, it looked unlike any aircraft that had come before. Its wings stretched 80 feet from tip to tip, longer than a commercial airliner, but attached to a fuselage no wider than a fighter jet. The proportions seemed wrong, as if someone had grafted the wings of a glider onto the body of a missile. This unusual design was dictated by the aircraft's mission. To reach altitudes above 70,000 feet, the U-2 needed wings capable of generating lift in air so thin it was nearly vacuum. The long, narrow wings provided that capability, but they also made the aircraft extraordinarily difficult to fly. Pilots described it as balancing on a knife's edge, especially during landing approaches when the massive wings generated so much lift that touching down required precise timing and gentle hands on the controls. The test program began cautiously. Initial flights were conducted during daylight hours, with chase planes following at lower altitudes. But as confidence grew, the schedule shifted to dawn and dusk flights, times when the aircraft would be less visible to observers on the ground. Even so, the U-2's distinctive silhouette and flight profile began generating reports from puzzled witnesses across the American Southwest. Unlike conventional aircraft, the U-2 flew in the stratosphere, far above commercial air traffic and military jets. At that altitude, it appeared as a bright speck against the blue sky, moving slowly and steadily in a straight line. To observers on the ground, especially those unfamiliar with high-altitude flight characteristics, It looked otherworldly. Commercial pilots reported seeing metallic objects at impossible altitudes. Air traffic controllers tracked radar returns that didn't correspond to any known aircraft. The timing couldn't have been worse for maintaining secrecy. The mid-1950s marked the beginning of widespread public interest in unidentified flying objects. Reports of flying saucers filled newspapers and magazines. When witnesses described seeing strange aircraft over Nevada, Arizona, and California, many automatically assumed they were observing alien visitors rather than classified military tests. Kelly Johnson and his team were aware of this problem, but they had little choice. The U-2's mission requirements demanded high-altitude flight testing, and Groom Lake remained the only facility secure enough to support the program. They instituted additional security measures, scheduling the most sensitive flights during times when atmospheric conditions would make observation from the ground more difficult. The pilots themselves were sworn to absolute secrecy. Recruited from the Air Force's most experienced high-altitude specialists, they understood that their work would remain classified for decades. They flew without military markings, carried no identification that would link them to their true mission, and were instructed to claim they were conducting weather research if forced to make emergency landings in foreign territory. As test flights continued through 1956 and 57, the U-2's performance exceeded all expectations. It could reach altitudes above 80,000 feet and remain airborne for more than 8 hours. Its cameras, designed specifically for high-altitude reconnaissance, could photograph objects on the ground with remarkable clarity from 14 miles above the Earth's surface. But with success came new challenges. Each test flight generated more UFO reports from civilians and military personnel who couldn't explain what they were seeing. The aircraft's silver finish made it highly reflective, causing it to appear as a bright, pulsing light when viewed from below. Its slow, steady flight path differed dramatically from the erratic movements typically associated with conventional aircraft. Intelligence officials found themselves in an impossible position. They couldn't reveal the true nature of the aircraft without compromising national security. But they also couldn't ignore the growing number of UFO reports generated by their own test program. The solution was a carefully managed disinformation campaign that neither confirmed nor denied the UFO sightings, while subtly directing attention away from the truth. By 1957, the U-2 was ready for operational deployment. The test program at Groom Lake had proven the aircraft's capabilities and trained the pilots who would soon begin flying surveillance missions over the Soviet Union. But the facility's work was far from finished. Even as the U-2 prepared for its first operational flights, Johnson's team was already designing its successor, an aircraft that would fly even higher and faster than anything yet imagined. Chapter 3: Project Oxcart and the A-12 Blackbird. By 1959, the U-2 spy plane was already being shot down over hostile territory. Soviet surface-to-air missiles had evolved to reach the altitudes where America's premier reconnaissance aircraft operated, and intelligence officials knew they needed something faster, higher, and more elusive. What they got was an aircraft so advanced it seemed to come from a different century entirely. Project Oxcart began in the deepest secrecy at Groom Lake, where Kelly Johnson's Skunk Works team faced an impossible challenge. Build an aircraft capable of flying at Mach 3.5, sustaining that speed for thousands of miles, and operating at altitudes above 85,000 feet. No existing technology could meet these requirements. Everything from the engines to the fuel would have to be invented from scratch. The result was the A-12, an aircraft that looked like it had been carved from a single piece of black metal. Its fuselage stretched over 100 feet from nose to tail, but stood only 18 feet high. Twin engines hung beneath delta wings that swept back at sharp angles, giving the entire aircraft the appearance of a flattened arrowhead. When mechanics rolled the first prototype from its hangar into the Nevada sunlight, even the test crews stopped their work to stare. The engineering challenges were staggering. At Mach 3+, air friction would heat the aircraft's skin to over 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Aluminum would soften and warp under such conditions, so Johnson's team turned to titanium, a metal so difficult to work with that it had never been used in large-scale aircraft construction. The titanium had to be specially processed, shaped using techniques that didn't exist when the project began, and assembled using custom tools designed specifically for this aircraft. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. The Soviet Union, the very nation this aircraft was designed to spy upon, became its primary source of raw materials. American companies quietly purchased titanium from Soviet suppliers through shell corporations and third-party dealers, buying the metal that would form the skin of the most advanced reconnaissance aircraft ever built. Soviet metallurgists unknowingly provided the materials that would allow American pilots to photograph their most sensitive military installations. But titanium was only the beginning of the technological challenges. The A-12's engines had to operate in conditions no previous aircraft had ever encountered. At 85,000 feet, the air was so thin that conventional jet engines couldn't function. Pratt & Whitney developed entirely new power plants, engines that breathed the rarefied air of the stratosphere and produced thrust equivalent to a destroyer's engines while weighing less than a small car. The fuel system presented another puzzle. At the extreme speeds and altitudes the A-12 would reach, ordinary aviation fuel would boil or freeze. Shell Oil developed a special formulation, designated JP7, that remained stable under conditions no fuel had ever been asked to endure. The aircraft carried over 3,000 gallons of this exotic fuel, enough to sustain flight for more than 3 hours at maximum speed. Test flights began at Groom Lake in 1962 and immediately generated problems the engineers hadn't anticipated. The aircraft was so fast and flew so high that it appeared on radar screens as an anomaly that defied explanation. Air traffic controllers tracked objects moving at impossible speeds on impossible flight paths. Military radar operators reported contacts that accelerated through the sound barrier without the characteristic signature of conventional aircraft. The A-12's appearance during daylight flights was even more problematic. The aircraft's black finish was designed to absorb radar energy, but it also made the craft nearly invisible against the dark background of space when viewed from below. Observers on the ground reported seeing strange shadows crossing the sun, or dark triangular shapes moving silently overhead at altitudes where no known aircraft could fly. Night flights created their own set of UFO reports. The A-12's engines produced a distinctive blue-white exhaust plume when operating at full power. From the ground, this appeared as a brilliant star moving across the sky at tremendous speed, often pulsing or changing intensity as the pilot adjusted throttle settings. Witnesses described seeing meteors that flew in straight lines, or satellites that moved far too fast to be in orbit. The test program pushed both aircraft and pilots to their limits. At maximum speed, the A-12's skin temperature rose so high that the fuselage actually stretched, growing several inches longer during flight. Pilots wore full pressure suits similar to those used by astronauts, as the cockpit environment at operational altitude was essentially the same as space. Radio communications were often impossible due to the ionized air surrounding the aircraft at high speed. Kelly Johnson insisted on personally overseeing every aspect of the test program. He established a small compound at Groom Lake, where his top engineers lived for months at a time, working 16-hour days to solve problems as they arose. Security was so tight that even within the Skunk Works team, information was compartmentalized. Engineers working on the engines knew nothing about the avionics systems. Pilots were briefed only on the specific flight profiles they would fly. The secrecy extended to every aspect of the program. Titanium shipments arrived at Groom Lake in unmarked trucks under heavy security escort. Test flights were scheduled to avoid commercial satellite passes and foreign intelligence aircraft. Even the aircraft's official designation was classified, known to most personnel only by its code name. By 1964, the A-12 had exceeded all performance expectations. It could sustain Mach 3.2 for over an hour, reach altitudes above 90,000 feet, and photograph targets with resolution that amazed intelligence analysts. But with success came new challenges. Each test flight generated more UFO reports from military and civilian observers who couldn't explain what they were seeing. The aircraft's performance was so far beyond contemporary understanding that even trained pilots and radar operators struggled to believe their instruments. The A-12 could accelerate from subsonic to Mach 3 in less than 5 minutes. It could climb 30,000 feet per minute under certain conditions. To observers unfamiliar with its capabilities, it appeared to violate the laws of physics. Intelligence officials found themselves managing two separate secrecy challenges. They had to protect the aircraft's technological secrets from foreign intelligence services, while also preventing its test flights from creating a public panic about UFO sightings. The solution was a carefully orchestrated information campaign that neither confirmed nor denied unusual aircraft activity, while directing attention toward more conventional explanations. As the test program neared completion, the A-12 had proven that humans could build aircraft approaching the theoretical limits of atmospheric flight. But it had also demonstrated that advanced technology, when glimpsed by unprepared observers, was virtually indistinguishable from the impossible. The line between breakthrough engineering and apparent magic had never been thinner. Chapter 4: The Stealth Revolution at Groom Lake. In the early 1970s, a revolution in warfare began quietly in the Nevada desert, born from a simple but radical idea. What if aircraft could be made invisible to radar? Not through exotic technology or science fiction concepts, but through careful engineering and an understanding of how electromagnetic waves behave when they encounter carefully shaped surfaces. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. Soviet physicist Pyotr Ufimtsev had published a paper on electromagnetic wave diffraction that most Western scientists ignored. But engineers at Lockheed's Skunk Works recognized its potential. If radar energy could be predicted and controlled, an aircraft could be designed to scatter those signals away from their source, rendering the plane nearly invisible to enemy detection systems. This concept would be tested at Groom Lake in a program that pushed the boundaries of both aerodynamics and material science. The result would be aircraft that looked so strange, so fundamentally different from conventional designs, that witnesses who glimpsed them during testing often struggled to believe what they were seeing. The first experimental aircraft was called Have Blue, and it appeared to have been assembled from geometric shapes rather than aerodynamic curves. Its fuselage consisted of flat panels joined at sharp angles, giving it the appearance of a flying polygon. Where conventional aircraft featured smooth, rounded surfaces designed to slip through the air with minimum resistance, HAVBLU looked like it had been designed by mathematicians rather than aeronautical engineers. The angular design wasn't aesthetic. Every surface angle was calculated to deflect radar energy in specific directions away from the transmitting radar station. The result was an aircraft that appeared on radar screens as little more than background noise, smaller than a bird despite weighing several tons. But this revolutionary capability came at a cost. The sharp angles and flat surfaces that made the aircraft invisible to radar also made it aerodynamically unstable. Flying HAVBLU required constant computer assistance. The aircraft's flight control system made thousands of adjustments per second, keeping the unstable design in controlled flight. Pilots described it as riding a motorcycle balanced on a tightrope, requiring complete trust in systems they couldn't see or fully understand. Any failure of the electronic flight controls would result in immediate loss of control and probable destruction of the aircraft. Test flights began at Groom Lake in 1977, conducted exclusively during the darkest hours before dawn. The aircraft's unusual appearance made secrecy critical. Even at night, its angular silhouette was unlike anything that had flown before. Ground observers who caught glimpses of HAVBLU during its brief test program reported seeing triangular objects with no visible engines, moving silently through the night sky. The success of HAVBLU led to an operational stealth fighter program, designated Senior Trend, but later known as the F-117 Nighthawk. If HAVBLU looked unusual, the Nighthawk appeared to come from an alien civilization. Its faceted surfaces created a complex geometry of flat panels and sharp edges. No curves existed anywhere on the aircraft's exterior. Every line was straight, every surface flat, creating an appearance so distinctive that it was instantly recognizable, yet completely unlike any previous military aircraft. The Nighthawk's development at Groom Lake required new manufacturing techniques and materials that didn't exist when the program began. Radar-absorbing coatings had to be applied with microscopic precision. Any gap or imperfection in the surface treatment could create a radar signature that would compromise the aircraft's stealth characteristics. Assembly took place in specially constructed facilities where temperature, humidity, and contamination were controlled to laboratory standards. Night testing of the Nighthawk created a new category of UFO sightings throughout the American Southwest. The aircraft's angular shape, combined with its nearly silent operation, produced reports that defied conventional explanation. Witnesses described seeing triangular craft with straight edges and flat surfaces, moving without visible propulsion systems. The aircraft's exhaust, carefully designed to minimize infrared signature, often appeared as a dim glow rather than the bright flames associated with conventional jet engines. The Nighthawk's operational profile made sightings even more mysterious. The aircraft flew primarily at night, often at low altitudes where its angular shape could be seen more clearly. Its mission requirements meant it couldn't follow standard flight patterns or operate from conventional airfields. Test flights from Groom Lake took the aircraft over sparsely populated areas where witnesses were rare but not entirely absent. Pilots training on the Nighthawk faced challenges unlike any previous aircraft. The combination of an unstable airframe, revolutionary flight controls, and night operations in restricted airspace created a demanding environment where small errors could have catastrophic consequences. The aircraft's stealth characteristics also meant that air traffic control couldn't track its position using conventional radar, requiring new communication and navigation procedures. The materials science revolution at Groom Lake extended beyond just radar absorption. Engineers developed new composites that were lighter than aluminum but stronger than steel. Coating systems were created that could absorb electromagnetic energy across multiple frequency bands. Manufacturing processes were perfected that could create complex shapes with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. Each breakthrough created new security challenges. The techniques used to create stealth aircraft represented strategic advantages that foreign intelligence services desperately wanted to acquire. Transportation of components to Groom Lake required elaborate security measures. Even the disposal of manufacturing waste was classified, as foreign analysts could potentially reconstruct stealth technologies from discarded materials. The psychological impact of stealth technology on test crews was significant. Pilots and ground personnel were working with capabilities that seemed to contradict natural law. Aircraft that disappeared from radar screens, materials that absorbed energy rather than reflecting it, and flight characteristics that challenged conventional understanding of aerodynamics. The technology was so advanced that it felt almost magical to those working with it daily. By the early 1980s, the stealth revolution at Groom Lake had proven that aircraft could be made effectively invisible to radar detection systems. But this success created new challenges for maintaining secrecy. The Nighthawk's distinctive appearance meant that any sighting, no matter how brief, would generate reports that were difficult to explain or dismiss. The aircraft was too unusual to mistake for conventional military jets, too advanced to attribute to foreign technology. Intelligence officials found themselves managing a careful balance between operational testing and public exposure. Flight schedules were coordinated with weather patterns to maximize cloud cover. Routes were planned to avoid populated areas and known observation points. Even with these precautions, sightings occurred regularly, adding to the growing mythology surrounding Area 51. The stealth program represented more than just technological advancement. It demonstrated that human engineering could create aircraft that challenged observers' ability to believe their own eyes. When technology advanced far enough ahead of public knowledge, the result was indistinguishable from the impossible. In the Nevada desert, that line between advanced engineering and apparent magic had been crossed once again. Chapter 5: Foreign Technology Evaluation. In the shadows of the Cold War, some of the most sensitive intelligence operations involved not stealing enemy secrets, but acquiring the enemy's actual weapons. At Groom Lake, American test pilots found themselves flying Soviet fighter aircraft, learning their capabilities and weaknesses through direct experience. These programs, known by code names like Red Hat and Constant Peg, turned Area 51 into a secret battlefield where East met West in the controlled environment of the Nevada desert. The story begins with defection and desperation. In 1966, an Iraqi pilot named Munir Redfa flew his MiG-21 directly to Israel, seeking asylum and bringing with him one of the Soviet Union's most advanced fighter aircraft. Israeli intelligence officials immediately recognized the prize they had acquired. The MiG-21 was the backbone of Soviet air power, flown by their allies around the world, and Western intelligence knew almost nothing about its true capabilities. Within months, the aircraft was secretly transported to the United States, arriving at Groom Lake in sections aboard cargo aircraft under the deepest classification levels. American engineers and pilots would finally have the opportunity to examine Soviet engineering up close, to understand how their adversaries built fighter aircraft, and to develop countermeasures against technology they had only glimpsed in reconnaissance photographs. The MiG-21 looked alien to American pilots accustomed to Western aircraft design philosophy. Where American fighters emphasized pilot comfort and sophisticated avionics, the Soviet design prioritized simplicity and battlefield maintenance. The cockpit was cramped and Spartan. Controls were mechanical rather than electronic. Every system was designed to function in the harsh conditions of field airstrips and combat environments, where precision maintenance was impossible. But flying the aircraft revealed capabilities that surprised American test pilots. The MiG-21 could climb faster than any contemporary Western fighter. Its turning radius at certain altitudes was remarkably tight. Most importantly, its infrared signature and radar cross-section were smaller than intelligence estimates had suggested. The aircraft that looked primitive was actually elegantly engineered for its specific mission requirements. Test flights at Groom Lake followed rigid security protocols. Soviet aircraft were flown only during carefully planned windows when satellites were not overhead and when atmospheric conditions would prevent ground observation. Pilots were sworn to secrecy levels beyond even the stealth programs. The very existence of these aircraft on American soil would have been a diplomatic catastrophe if discovered by Soviet intelligence. The success of the MiG-21 evaluation led to more ambitious acquisition efforts. American intelligence agencies began actively seeking opportunities to obtain other Soviet aircraft through defection, covert purchase, or battlefield recovery. Each new aircraft brought to Groom Lake provided insights into Soviet design philosophy, manufacturing capabilities, and technological advancement. The logistics of hiding enemy aircraft at an already secretive base created unprecedented challenges. Hangars had to be modified to accommodate aircraft with different dimensions and service requirements. Specialized tools and spare parts had to be acquired without revealing their intended purpose. Most critically, the very existence of foreign aircraft had to be concealed from most base personnel, creating classified programs within classified programs. Red Hat Squadron became the formal designation for the unit responsible for evaluating captured Soviet aircraft. Pilots assigned to the program underwent psychological evaluations beyond the normal security clearance process. They had to be capable of adapting to unfamiliar flight characteristics while maintaining absolute secrecy about aircraft that officially didn't exist in American hands. Training on Soviet aircraft revealed fundamental differences in aviation philosophy. Soviet designers accepted higher pilot workload in exchange for simpler systems that were easier to maintain in combat conditions. American pilots found themselves working harder to fly these aircraft, but also discovered that Soviet engineering solutions were often more robust than their Western counterparts. The Constant Peg program expanded foreign technology evaluation to include operational training exercises. American fighter pilots flew mock combat missions against the captured Soviet aircraft, learning their performance envelopes and tactical limitations. These exercises provided invaluable training for pilots who might encounter similar aircraft in actual combat situations. Security measures around foreign aircraft testing were extraordinary, even by Groom Lake standards. Satellite tracking was coordinated with test flight schedules to ensure no overhead observation during flying operations. Weather conditions were monitored constantly, as unexpected cloud breaks could expose aircraft to visual observation from distant ridges. Even the timing of aircraft movements between hangars was classified. The psychological impact on test crews was significant. American pilots and mechanics found themselves working daily with aircraft designed by their adversaries, built in factories they might one day be ordered to attack. The intimacy of operating enemy equipment created a complex relationship between professional admiration for Soviet engineering and awareness of the weapon's intended purpose. By the 1970s, Groom Lake housed a secret air force of Soviet aircraft spanning multiple generations of fighter design. MiG-17, 19, 21, and 23 aircraft provided a comprehensive picture of Soviet aviation development. Each aircraft told a story about resource allocation, technological priorities, and operational doctrine within the Warsaw Pact. Intelligence analysts studied not just the aircraft's performance, but their construction techniques and material choices. Soviet manufacturing methods revealed information about industrial capabilities, resource constraints, and quality control procedures. Even the type of rivets used in assembly provided insights into Soviet metallurgy and production processes. The presence of enemy aircraft at Groom Lake created unique challenges for maintaining the base's UFO mythology. Soviet fighters looked distinctly different from American aircraft, with different proportions, engine configurations, and flight characteristics. When glimpsed during testing, they could appear to be unknown aircraft types, fueling speculation about exotic technology development. Night flights of captured aircraft generated particularly confusing reports from outside observers. Soviet aircraft often used different navigation light configurations than American fighters. Their engine signatures produced unusual visual and acoustic characteristics. To untrained observers, these differences could suggest aircraft of unknown origin rather than familiar designs from foreign manufacturers. The foreign technology evaluation programs continued well into the 1980s, adapting to include newer Soviet aircraft as they became available through various intelligence channels. Each acquisition required elaborate cover stories, transportation arrangements, and security protocols that protected both the aircraft and the methods used to obtain them. The knowledge gained from these programs influenced American aircraft design for decades. Understanding Soviet capabilities and limitations shaped requirements for new American fighters. Combat tactics were developed specifically to exploit weaknesses discovered through direct flight testing of enemy aircraft. As the Cold War began to wind down, the foreign technology evaluation programs at Groom Lake evolved to address new threats and opportunities. But the fundamental principle remained unchanged. The best way to understand an adversary's capabilities was to literally fly in their aircraft, to see the world through their instruments, and to discover the strengths and weaknesses that could only be learned through direct experience in the unforgiving environment of the Nevada desert. Chapter 6: The Test Pilots of Groom Lake. In the history of aviation, no group of pilots has faced greater challenges or carried heavier burdens of secrecy than the test pilots of Groom Lake. These men, and they were almost exclusively men in those early decades, represented the absolute pinnacle of flying skill, selected not just for their technical abilities, but for their psychological resilience and unwavering discretion. They flew aircraft that existed at the bleeding edge of human engineering, machines that pushed the boundaries of physics and often demanded the ultimate sacrifice from those who dared to fly them. The selection process for Groom Lake test pilots was unlike anything in conventional military aviation. Candidates were first identified through performance records that demonstrated exceptional skill under pressure. High-altitude experience was essential, as was a demonstrated ability to remain calm during emergency situations. But technical skill was only the beginning. Psychological evaluations delved into aspects of personality that most pilots never faced. Could they maintain secrecy under interrogation? Could they lie convincingly to their own families about their daily work? Could they live with the knowledge that their achievements might never be publicly acknowledged? Once selected, pilots entered a world where conventional aviation experience was often more hindrance than help. The aircraft they would fly operated on principles that challenged everything they thought they knew about flight. The U-2 required pilots to wear full pressure suits similar to those used by astronauts, as the cockpit environment at operational altitude was essentially space. Landing the aircraft was an exercise in precision timing, as its enormous wings generated so much lift that touching down required split-second judgment and gentle hands on the controls. The A-12 presented even greater challenges. At Mach 3+, the aircraft's skin temperature rose so high that the fuselage actually stretched during flight, growing several inches longer at maximum speed. Pilots had to trust instruments that seemed to contradict physical possibility. Radio communications were often impossible due to the ionized air surrounding the aircraft. Emergency procedures were largely theoretical, as ejecting at operational speed and altitude would likely be fatal regardless of equipment performance. Stealth aircraft brought their own unique psychological pressures. The F-117 was aerodynamically unstable, requiring constant computer assistance to maintain controlled flight. Pilots described it as riding a motorcycle balanced on a knife's edge, where any loss of electronic flight control would result in immediate destruction of the aircraft. The knowledge that their lives depended entirely on computer systems they couldn't see or fully understand created a level of stress that few other professions could match. The secrecy requirements placed enormous strain on personal relationships. Test pilots at Groom Lake couldn't discuss their work with spouses, children, or closest friends. They disappeared for weeks at a time, on assignments they couldn't explain, returning home with experiences they couldn't share. Many marriages suffered under the weight of secrets that created invisible barriers between partners. Children grew up knowing their fathers did something important but dangerous, without ever understanding what that something was. Near-death experiences were common enough to be considered occupational hazards. The U-2 program lost several aircraft and pilots during testing, victims of an aircraft that operated at the very limits of human engineering capability. 12 test flights resulted in multiple emergency landings and at least one aircraft loss when engine failure at Mach 3+ created conditions that no amount of pilot skill could overcome. Stealth aircraft testing claimed its own toll, as pilots pushed unstable aircraft through flight profiles that would destroy any conventional fighter. The psychological impact of these experiences was profound. Test pilots found themselves living in a state of controlled paranoia, where discussing their work with unauthorized personnel could result in decades in federal prison. They developed relationships with aircraft that were more intimate than most people's relationships with other humans. They knew every vibration, every unusual sound, every subtle change in handling that might indicate impending disaster. Chuck Yeager, though he never flew regularly at Groom Lake, understood the mentality. The test pilots of the Nevada desert possessed what he called the right stuff, but their version was different from conventional test pilots. They had to maintain the same cool professionalism under pressure while carrying the additional burden of absolute secrecy. Their achievements would remain classified for decades, their contributions to aviation history known only to a handful of colleagues and supervisors. The training process was as classified as the aircraft themselves. Pilots learned to fly experimental machines through a combination of simulator work, ground school, and carefully supervised first flights. But simulators could only approximate the experience of flying aircraft that operated beyond known performance envelopes. First flights were often voyages into the unknown, where the pilot's skill and judgment were the only safety nets available. Medical monitoring of test pilots was extensive and intrusive. The effects of high-altitude flight, extreme acceleration, and exposure to exotic materials were largely unknown. Pilots underwent regular physical examinations that were more comprehensive than those given to astronauts. Blood tests, neurological evaluations, and psychological assessments tracked changes that might indicate problems with new aircraft or flight environments. The camaraderie among Groom Lake test pilots was intense but carefully circumscribed. They could discuss their experiences with each other, but only within the confines of the secured facility. Off-duty conversations about work were forbidden, even among pilots who flew the same aircraft. This created relationships that were simultaneously close and distant, built on shared experiences that could never be fully discussed. Retirement from test pilot duties at Groom Lake didn't end the secrecy requirements. Pilots signed agreements that bound them to silence for life, with penalties that included loss of pension benefits and criminal prosecution. Many carried their secrets to the grave, taking with them first-hand knowledge of aircraft and capabilities that remained classified long after the technology had been superseded. The families of test pilots developed their own coping mechanisms for living with secrecy. Spouses learned not to ask questions about unusual work schedules or unexplained absences. Children grew up understanding that their father's work was different from other parents' jobs, without ever learning exactly how different. The stress of maintaining these secrets created its own casualties among family members who struggled with the isolation and uncertainty. Some pilots found the secrecy liberating rather than burdensome. They could focus entirely on the technical challenges of flight testing without concern for public relations or media attention. Their achievements were measured purely by mission success and aircraft performance, not by public recognition or career advancement. For personality types that thrived on technical challenge and professional accomplishment, this environment was ideal. The legacy of Groom Lake test pilots extends far beyond the aircraft they flew. Their willingness to risk their lives testing experimental technology contributed directly to American air superiority during the Cold War and beyond. The intelligence gathered by U-2 flights helped prevent nuclear war. The capabilities demonstrated by stealth aircraft changed the nature of modern warfare. These achievements came at tremendous personal cost to the pilots and families who made them possible, sacrifices that remained largely unrecognized by the public they served. Chapter 7: Underground Facilities and Hidden Infrastructure. Beneath the sun-baked surface of Groom Lake, where the visible runways and hangars have captured public attention for decades, lies what may be the most intriguing aspect of Area 51, the underground. A hidden world of tunnels, chambers, and facilities that exists in the realm of speculation and scattered evidence, yet persists in the accounts of contractors, the analysis of geological surveys, and the careful study of satellite imagery that hints at construction projects extending far below the desert floor. The first whispers of underground construction at Groom Lake emerged in the 1960s during the height of Cold War construction projects, when military facilities across the United States were being hardened against potential nuclear attack. But the scale suggested at Area 51 went beyond conventional bunker construction. Former contractors spoke of excavation projects that continued for months, of concrete deliveries that seemed excessive for surface construction, and of specialized equipment designed for underground work, arriving under the heaviest security classifications. Satellite imagery from commercial providers began revealing anomalies in the 1980s and 90s. Patterns in the desert floor suggested extensive excavation and backfill operations. Roads appeared to lead toward mountainsides and then simply end, with no visible destination or purpose. Construction equipment was photographed in locations where no surface building projects were evident. Most intriguingly, the electrical power infrastructure serving the base appeared to be substantially larger than surface facilities alone would require. The geology of the Groom Lake area presents both opportunities and challenges for underground construction. The desert floor consists largely of sedimentary deposits that can be excavated relatively easily with appropriate equipment. Beneath these surface layers lie more stable rock formations that could support large underground chambers. The water table in the region is deep enough that flooding would not be a significant concern for facilities constructed at moderate depths. Contractors who worked on various projects at the base over the decades have provided fragmentary accounts of underground construction activities. Heavy equipment operators described digging foundations that seemed unusually deep for the surface structures being erected above them. Concrete workers reported pouring vastly more material than the visible buildings would require. Electrical contractors installed power distribution systems with capacity far exceeding the apparent needs of surface facilities. The transportation of materials to support large-scale underground construction would itself require significant operational security. Concrete trucks, steel beams, and specialized excavation equipment would need to be brought to the site without revealing the true scope of construction activities. This would necessitate coordination with suppliers who either possessed appropriate security clearances or operated under cover stories that concealed the ultimate purpose of their deliveries. One of the most persistent elements in accounts of underground facilities is the description of elevator systems that descend far below ground level. Multiple sources have described riding elevators that operate for what seemed like unusually long periods, suggesting descent to significant depths. These accounts often include details about security checkpoints at different levels, implying a complex multi-story underground structure with restricted access between floors. The climate control requirements for large underground facilities would be substantial and technically challenging. Desert environments create extreme temperature variations between day and night, while underground spaces require constant environmental management to prevent humidity problems and maintain air quality. The power requirements for such systems would be significant, potentially explaining the apparently oversized electrical infrastructure serving the base. Storage capabilities represent one of the most logical applications for underground facilities at Groom Lake. Climate-controlled environments would be ideal for preserving sensitive materials, whether exotic aircraft components, classified documents, or technological artifacts requiring specific environmental conditions. Underground storage would also provide protection against satellite surveillance and foreign intelligence gathering efforts. Tunnel systems connecting different areas of the base have been suggested by various sources over the years. Such tunnels would allow personnel and materials to be moved between facilities without surface exposure, maintaining operational security even against overhead observation. The distances involved at Groom Lake would make tunnel construction a major undertaking, but the security benefits might justify the enormous expense and engineering challenges. The acoustic signature of underground construction activities would be difficult to completely suppress. Heavy excavation equipment, concrete pumping operations, and the movement of large quantities of material would generate noise and vibration patterns that could potentially be detected by sensitive monitoring equipment. The isolation of Groom Lake would help mask such activities, but complete concealment would require careful coordination of construction schedules and techniques. Waste disposal from major underground construction projects presents its own security challenges. Excavated material must go somewhere, and the quantities involved in large-scale underground construction would be substantial. Satellite analysts have noted areas around Groom Lake where the terrain appears to have been modified by the addition of fill material, potentially representing the surface evidence of underground excavation projects. The timeline for underground construction at Area 51 appears to have extended over several decades, with different phases corresponding to changing mission requirements and available technology. Early projects may have focused on basic storage and protection capabilities, while later construction could have incorporated more sophisticated environmental controls and security systems. Personnel access to underground facilities would require the same level of security screening applied to surface operations, but with additional compartmentalization to limit knowledge of the underground infrastructure's extent and purpose. Workers might be granted access to specific underground areas while remaining unaware of the broader scope of subterranean construction. Maintenance of underground facilities presents ongoing operational challenges. Complex environmental control systems, elevator mechanisms, and structural elements would require regular service by personnel with appropriate security clearances. The specialized nature of underground facility maintenance might necessitate bringing contractors to the site under cover stories that conceal the true nature of their work. The strategic value of underground facilities at Groom Lake would extend beyond simple concealment of sensitive materials or activities. Hardened underground spaces could provide continuity of operations during periods of heightened international tension. Climate-controlled environments could preserve critical technologies and materials for decades without degradation. Most importantly, underground facilities would provide an additional layer of security against foreign intelligence efforts that have successfully penetrated surface operations at other sensitive installations. Modern satellite technology has made surface concealment increasingly difficult, but underground activities remain largely invisible to overhead surveillance. The construction techniques and materials science advances of recent decades have made large-scale underground construction more feasible than during earlier periods of Area 51's development. Whether such construction has occurred, and to what extent, remains a subject of speculation, supported by fragmentary evidence and persistent accounts from those who claim first-hand knowledge of Groom Lake's hidden depths. Chapter 8: Security and Surveillance Systems. The perimeter of Area 51 extends far beyond any visible fence line, protected by layers of technology and human vigilance that create an invisible fortress in the Nevada desert. This security apparatus, refined over decades of protecting America's most sensitive aerospace programs, represents one of the most sophisticated surveillance systems ever deployed to guard a single facility. Every approach to Groom Lake is monitored, every movement detected, and every intrusion met with swift and professional response. The outer ring of detection begins miles from the actual restricted boundary. Seismic sensors buried throughout the desert floor can detect the footsteps of a single person walking across the hardpan at remarkable distances. These sensors are so sensitive that they can distinguish between human movement, vehicle traffic, and natural phenomena like wind patterns or small animals. The sensor network creates an early warning system that alerts security personnel long before any intruder could reach sensitive areas. Motion detectors positioned on hidden poles throughout the approach corridors provide the next layer of surveillance. These devices use multiple detection methods, including infrared, radar, and optical systems that can operate effectively in the extreme conditions of the desert environment. The sensors are hardened against sandstorms, temperature extremes, and the intense solar radiation that characterizes the Nevada high desert. Camera systems provide visual confirmation of detected movement, employing both fixed installations and mobile platforms that can be repositioned as needed. The cameras utilize advanced optics capable of clear imaging at distances measured in miles, with stabilization systems that compensate for heat shimmer and atmospheric distortion. Night vision capabilities ensure 24-hour surveillance regardless of lighting conditions. The famous warning signs that mark the restricted boundary serve multiple purposes beyond simple notification. The signs themselves contain embedded sensors that detect when they have been approached or tampered with. The language on the signs has been carefully crafted by legal experts to establish clear notice of restricted access, while providing maximum legal authority for subsequent enforcement actions. Radio frequency monitoring equipment, positioned throughout the region, tracks all communications in and out of the area. Cell phone signals, radio transmissions, and other electronic communications are intercepted and analyzed for potential security threats. The monitoring system can triangulate the position of transmitting devices and identify individuals who may be conducting surveillance or intelligence gathering activities. The human element of the security system consists of the guards known colloquially as camo dudes, security personnel who patrol the perimeter and respond to detection system alerts. These guards are highly trained professionals, often with military or law enforcement backgrounds, who understand both the legal limitations of their authority and the importance of maintaining security without creating incidents that might draw unwanted attention. Response protocols are carefully structured to provide graduated levels of intervention based on the nature and severity of security breaches. Initial contact with trespassers is typically polite but firm, with guards attempting to resolve situations through verbal warnings and escort services. However, the security force is authorized to use more aggressive measures when circumstances warrant, including detention, equipment confiscation, and coordination with federal law enforcement agencies. The legal authority for these security measures derives from multiple sources, including presidential executive orders, Department of Defense regulations, and federal statutes governing restricted airspace and sensitive installations. The complexity of the legal framework ensures that security personnel have clear authority to protect the facility while operating within constitutional limitations on government power. Vehicle barriers and access control points funnel all legitimate traffic through monitored checkpoints where identification can be verified and authorization confirmed. The checkpoint systems include document scanners, biometric readers, and communication links to central databases that can instantly verify the identity and clearance level of personnel seeking access to the facility. Underground sensor networks extend the detection capability beyond surface monitoring. Vibration detectors can identify tunneling attempts or underground approach routes that might bypass surface security measures. The underground sensor grid is integrated with the surface detection systems to provide comprehensive three-dimensional surveillance of the restricted area. Weather monitoring systems track atmospheric conditions that might affect surveillance equipment performance or create opportunities for covert approach. Wind patterns, visibility conditions, and precipitation levels are continuously monitored to ensure that security protocols can be adjusted for changing environmental conditions. Electronic warfare capabilities protect the facility against surveillance attempts using technical means. Radar jamming systems can disrupt unauthorized electronic surveillance efforts, while radio frequency analyzers can detect and locate concealed transmitting devices. The electronic security systems are regularly updated to address new technologies that might be employed by foreign intelligence services or other adversaries. Communication security extends beyond the immediate facility to include coordination with other military installations, federal agencies, and local law enforcement organizations. Secure communication links ensure that security incidents can be reported and coordinated without compromising operational security or revealing sensitive information about the facility's activities. Personnel screening for security positions involves extensive background investigations, psychological evaluations, and ongoing monitoring to ensure that guards maintain the highest levels of reliability and discretion. Security personnel are required to undergo regular retraining and evaluation to ensure their continued effectiveness in protecting sensitive installations. The integration of all these security systems creates a comprehensive defensive network that operates automatically in many circumstances, while providing human operators with detailed information needed to make tactical decisions. Computer systems analyze sensor data, correlate information from multiple sources, and provide automated alerts when predetermined threat conditions are detected. Maintenance of the security infrastructure requires constant attention from technical specialists who must service equipment in harsh desert conditions while maintaining the secrecy essential to effective surveillance. Maintenance schedules are coordinated with operational activities to minimize vulnerabilities during service periods. The evolution of security technology at Area 51 has paralleled advances in commercial and military surveillance systems, often incorporating capabilities that are years ahead of what is available to conventional security applications. The facility serves as a testing ground for security technologies that may later be deployed at other sensitive installations. Counter-surveillance measures protect the security system itself against analysis or compromise by hostile intelligence services. False sensor readings, decoy installations, and misdirection techniques are employed to confuse potential adversaries attempting to map the security network or identify vulnerabilities. The psychological impact of the security system extends far beyond its actual detection capabilities. The knowledge that every approach to the facility is monitored creates a deterrent effect that discourages casual intrusion attempts while forcing serious adversaries to employ resources and techniques that increase their risk of detection. Training exercises regularly test the security system's effectiveness against simulated intrusion attempts. These exercises help identify weaknesses in coverage, coordination problems between different security elements, and opportunities for improving response procedures. The lessons learned from these exercises are incorporated into ongoing security improvements and personnel training programs. The success of Area 51's security system is measured not just by the incidents it detects and responds to, but by the incidents that never occur because potential intruders are deterred by the knowledge that the facility is comprehensively protected by multiple layers of advanced surveillance technology and professional security personnel. Chapter 9: The Aurora Mystery. In the classified world of aerospace development, few programs have generated as much speculation, intrigue, and controversy as the aircraft known simply as Aurora. This mysterious project, which may or may not exist depending on who you ask, represents the tantalizing possibility that somewhere in the Nevada desert, engineers have pushed the boundaries of atmospheric flight far beyond what the public believes possible. The Aurora story begins not with sightings or leaked photographs, but with numbers buried deep in defense budget documents. In 1985, aviation journalists analyzing Pentagon spending requests noticed an unusual line item. Tucked away in the classified portions of the Air Force budget was a program designation that hadn't appeared in previous years: Aurora. No description, no explanation, just a name attached to funding that would eventually total billions of dollars over the following decade. Budget analysts who specialized in tracking classified programs recognized the pattern. Large, sustained funding with no corresponding public aircraft program usually indicated a black project of significant scope. The timing suggested a successor to the SR-71 Blackbird, which was approaching retirement after decades of service. If American intelligence agencies needed a replacement for their premier reconnaissance aircraft, it would have to be faster, higher flying, and more survivable than anything that had come before. The first hints that such an aircraft might be under development came from an unexpected source. Seismic monitoring stations across the American Southwest began detecting unusual signatures in the late 1980s. These readings showed characteristics consistent with very high-speed aircraft, but at velocities that exceeded known capabilities. The signatures appeared over remote areas of Nevada, California, and the Pacific Ocean, always in regions where military testing activities were known to occur. Dr. Chris Gibson, a British engineer and aviation enthusiast, provided what many consider the most credible Aurora sighting in 1989. While working on an oil rig in the North Sea, Gibson observed a triangular aircraft being refueled by a KC-135 tanker escorted by two F-111 fighters. The triangular craft was unlike anything in the known aircraft inventory, with a shape that suggested optimization for very high-speed flight rather than conventional aerodynamic efficiency. Other sightings began accumulating throughout the 1990s. Witnesses described aircraft with triangular or diamond-shaped planforms, often observed during dawn or dusk hours when atmospheric conditions provided optimal visibility. The craft were typically described as moving at extremely high speeds, often producing unusual contrails or exhaust signatures that differed from conventional jet aircraft. The acoustic signature reported by many witnesses became known as the pulse detonation wave engine sound. Instead of the steady roar of conventional jet engines, observers described a rhythmic pulsing noise, almost like controlled explosions occurring in rapid sequence. This description matched theoretical propulsion systems that aerospace engineers had been studying for hypersonic flight applications. Geographical analysis of reported sightings revealed patterns consistent with flight testing from Groom Lake and other classified facilities in the Nevada Test and Training Range. Flight paths typically originated from restricted airspace and proceeded over sparsely populated areas toward the Pacific Ocean. The routes suggested aircraft capable of transcontinental or transoceanic missions at speeds far exceeding conventional aircraft capabilities. The technical requirements for a hypersonic reconnaissance aircraft would push engineering into largely unexplored territory. Sustained flight above Mach 5 would require revolutionary advances in materials science, propulsion technology, and thermal management. The aircraft's structure would need to withstand temperatures that would destroy conventional materials. Propulsion systems would need to operate efficiently across a speed range from takeoff to hypersonic cruise. Scramjet technology represented the most likely propulsion solution for sustained hypersonic flight. Unlike conventional jet engines, scramjets compress incoming air through the engine's shape rather than rotating machinery, allowing operation at much higher speeds. However, scramjets cannot operate at low speeds, requiring another propulsion system for takeoff and acceleration to scramjet operating conditions. The secrecy surrounding potential Aurora development would necessarily exceed even the classification levels applied to previous black aircraft programs. Hypersonic flight capabilities would provide strategic advantages so significant that any information leakage could compromise national security interests. This level of classification would explain the absence of official acknowledgement and the aggressive efforts to discredit sighting reports. Materials science advances required for hypersonic flight would have applications far beyond aircraft development. Heat-resistant composites, advanced ceramics, and exotic cooling systems developed for Aurora could revolutionize multiple industries. The classification of such technologies would extend the secrecy requirements far beyond the aircraft program itself. Flight testing of hypersonic aircraft would create detection problems that conventional security measures might not adequately address. The acoustic signatures, visual characteristics, and radar profiles of such aircraft would be unlike anything previously encountered. Even experienced military personnel might have difficulty identifying hypersonic test flights as conventional aircraft activities. The international implications of operational hypersonic reconnaissance aircraft would be profound. The ability to overfly any target on Earth within hours of mission assignment would fundamentally change intelligence gathering capabilities. Such aircraft could potentially reach any location faster than diplomatic protests could be filed, making traditional air defense strategies largely irrelevant. Some researchers have suggested that Aurora might not be a single aircraft, but rather a technology demonstration program exploring multiple hypersonic flight concepts. This interpretation would explain the variety of shapes and performance characteristics reported by witnesses. Different test vehicles could be evaluating various approaches to solving the technical challenges of sustained hypersonic flight. The connection to Groom Lake seems logical for multiple reasons beyond simple security considerations. The facility's infrastructure, developed over decades of testing advanced aircraft, would be well suited to supporting hypersonic flight testing. The restricted airspace and remote location would provide ideal conditions for activities that might generate unusual visual and acoustic signatures. Advanced computational fluid dynamics and computer modeling capabilities developed since the 1980s would have made hypersonic aircraft design far more feasible than during earlier eras. The ability to simulate extreme flight conditions without building multiple test vehicles would significantly reduce program costs and development timelines. Satellite surveillance countermeasures would be essential for any hypersonic aircraft program. The combination of speed and altitude capabilities might allow such aircraft to avoid detection by timing flights between satellite passes or operating at altitudes beyond most surveillance system capabilities. Whether Aurora exists as an operational aircraft, a terminated research program, or simply an accounting designation for unrelated classified activities, remains one of the most persistent mysteries in modern aerospace. The evidence suggests that something unusual has been under development in the classified world, but the true nature and current status of that something continues to elude definitive confirmation. The Aurora mystery represents more than just speculation about a single aircraft program. It symbolizes the ongoing tension between technological possibility and official acknowledgement, between what engineering principles suggest might be achievable and what government sources are willing to confirm. In the Nevada desert, where the impossible has repeatedly become routine, Aurora remains a tantalizing possibility that continues to capture the imagination of anyone who wonders what might be flying in those restricted skies. Chapter 10: Drone Warfare Development. Long before unmanned aircraft became symbols of modern warfare, casting their shadows across battlefields from Afghanistan to Yemen, the first primitive drones were taking shape in the workshops and test facilities of Groom Lake. The isolation and secrecy of Area 51 provided the perfect laboratory for developing technologies that would fundamentally change the nature of military aviation, creating aircraft that could fly missions too dangerous, too long, or too sensitive for human pilots. The origins of unmanned flight testing at Groom Lake trace back to the early 1960s during the height of tensions with the Soviet Union. Intelligence agencies desperately needed ways to gather information about enemy capabilities without risking the lives of pilots or the diplomatic consequences of capture. The solution lay in developing aircraft that could operate without human crews, guided by the primitive but rapidly advancing computer technologies of the era. The first generation of drones tested at Groom Lake were essentially modified target aircraft, simple machines designed to fly straight and level while carrying camera equipment over predetermined routes. These early systems, known by designations like AQM-34 Ryan Firebee, represented crude but functional steps toward autonomous flight. The aircraft were launched from motherships, followed pre-programmed flight paths, and were recovered by parachute after completing their missions. Flight testing of these early drones revealed challenges that engineers hadn't fully anticipated. Without human pilots to make real-time adjustments, the aircraft had to cope with weather conditions, mechanical problems, and navigation errors using only their limited onboard systems. Many test flights ended in crashes or lost aircraft as the technology struggled to match the adaptability of human crews. The technical limitations of early drone systems were severe by contemporary standards. Navigation relied on inertial guidance systems that were prone to drift and error accumulation over long flights. Communication links were vulnerable to interference and had limited range. Most critically, the aircraft lacked the ability to make complex decisions or adapt to changing mission requirements during flight. Despite these limitations, the strategic advantages of unmanned aircraft were immediately apparent to military planners. Drones could fly missions over heavily defended territory without risking pilot lives. They could remain airborne for much longer periods than human crews could endure. Perhaps most importantly, they could carry out surveillance missions with complete deniability, as unmarked aircraft contained no evidence of their national origin. The success of early drone programs at Groom Lake led to more ambitious projects throughout the 1970s and 80s. Aircraft grew larger and more sophisticated, incorporating improved navigation systems, longer-range communication links, and more capable sensor packages. Some variants were designed specifically for signals intelligence gathering, while others focused on photographic reconnaissance or electronic warfare missions. One of the most significant advances came with the development of satellite communication systems that allowed drone operators to control aircraft from vast distances. This breakthrough meant that unmanned aircraft could be flown from ground stations thousands of miles away, removing the need for forward-deployed control teams and dramatically expanding operational flexibility. The stealth revolution of the 1980s naturally extended to unmanned aircraft development. Drone designers at Groom Lake began incorporating radar-absorbing materials and angular surface geometries that made their aircraft nearly invisible to enemy detection systems. These stealth drones represented the convergence of two revolutionary technologies, combining the survivability advantages of low observable design with the operational flexibility of unmanned flight. Testing stealth drones created new challenges for maintaining operational security at Area 51. The aircraft's unusual shapes and flight characteristics made them immediately recognizable as something extraordinary to any observer who caught a glimpse during test operations. Night testing became even more critical, as the angular geometries of stealth aircraft were impossible to mistake for conventional designs during daylight operations. The development of artificial intelligence systems during the 1990s opened new possibilities for autonomous aircraft operations. Drones began incorporating decision-making algorithms that could respond to changing tactical situations without constant human supervision. These systems allowed aircraft to automatically adjust flight paths, select targets, and even abort missions when pre-programmed safety conditions were not met. Advanced sensor integration became another focus of drone development at Groom Lake. Aircraft were equipped with multiple camera systems, radar mapping equipment, signals intelligence gathering devices, and other sensors that could provide comprehensive surveillance coverage of target areas. The ability to simultaneously gather intelligence across multiple spectra made individual drone missions far more valuable than traditional manned reconnaissance flights. The miniaturization of electronics and sensors enabled the development of much smaller unmanned aircraft during the 2000s. These systems could be deployed covertly, operate in urban environments, and conduct surveillance missions that would be impossible for larger aircraft. Testing these small drones required new facilities and procedures at Groom Lake, as their flight characteristics and operational requirements differed dramatically from conventional aircraft. Weapons integration represented perhaps the most controversial aspect of drone development. The ability to arm unmanned aircraft with precision-guided munitions created unprecedented capabilities for targeted strikes without risking pilot lives. However, it also raised ethical and legal questions about autonomous weapons systems that could select and engage targets without direct human authorization. The combat effectiveness of armed drones was proven during operations in Afghanistan and Iraq, where unmanned aircraft provided persistent surveillance and precision strike capabilities that conventional aircraft could not match. The success of these operations validated decades of development work conducted in the Nevada desert and established unmanned systems as permanent components of modern military aviation. Communication security became increasingly important as drone operations expanded globally. The data links connecting aircraft to ground control stations represented potential vulnerabilities that enemy forces could exploit through jamming or interception. Advanced encryption systems and frequency hopping radios were developed to protect these critical communication channels. The evolution of drone technology at Groom Lake paralleled broader advances in computer processing, satellite communications, and sensor miniaturization. Each technological breakthrough enabled new capabilities and mission profiles that pushed the boundaries of what unmanned aircraft could accomplish. The isolated testing environment of Area 51 provided the perfect laboratory for exploring these possibilities without foreign observation or interference. Training programs for drone operators evolved alongside the aircraft themselves. Early systems required pilots with conventional aviation backgrounds who could adapt their skills to remote aircraft control. As automation increased, operators needed different skill sets focused on systems management and tactical decision-making rather than traditional flying abilities. The psychological challenges of drone operations became apparent as the technology matured. Operators found themselves conducting combat missions from comfortable ground stations thousands of miles from actual battlefields. This disconnect between operators and consequences created unique stress patterns that military psychologists were still studying decades after the first armed drone missions. International legal frameworks struggled to keep pace with drone technology development. Questions about sovereignty, targeting authority, and collateral damage responsibility became increasingly complex as unmanned aircraft operations expanded globally. The legal precedents established during early drone deployments would influence international law for generations. The future of unmanned aircraft development at Groom Lake likely includes even more advanced artificial intelligence systems, hypersonic flight capabilities, and swarm coordination technologies that would allow multiple drones to operate cooperatively on complex missions. The facility that pioneered drone warfare continues to push the boundaries of what automated aircraft can accomplish in an increasingly complex strategic environment. Chapter 11: Experimental Propulsion Research. In the deepest classified corners of Groom Lake, where even the existence of certain programs remains unacknowledged decades after their inception, engineers and physicists have reportedly pushed the boundaries of propulsion technology far beyond what conventional aerospace textbooks suggest is possible. These experimental programs, known through fragments of patent filings, scattered research papers, and the carefully guarded testimonies of former contractors, hint at breakthroughs that could revolutionize not just aviation, but humanity's relationship with the fundamental forces of physics itself. The pursuit of exotic propulsion systems at Area 51 began with practical military requirements that conventional technology could not satisfy. Intelligence agencies needed aircraft that could fly higher, faster, and more efficiently than anything in the known inventory. The limitations of chemical rockets and jet engines were well understood, creating demand for entirely new approaches to generating thrust and achieving controlled flight. Scramjet technology represented one of the earliest exotic propulsion concepts tested in the Nevada desert. Unlike conventional jet engines that use rotating compressor blades to process incoming air, scramjets rely on their shape and the aircraft's forward velocity to compress air for combustion. This approach allows sustained operation at hypersonic speeds, but requires the aircraft to already be traveling faster than the speed of sound before the engines can function. Test flights of scramjet-powered vehicles reportedly began at Groom Lake in the late 1970s, using rocket boosters to accelerate experimental aircraft to the minimum operating speed required for scramjet ignition. The technical challenges were immense, as combustion had to be maintained in airflows moving at several times the speed of sound. Materials had to withstand temperatures that would destroy conventional engine components, and fuel injection systems had to operate reliably under conditions no previous aircraft had encountered. Plasma-based propulsion systems represented an even more exotic approach to atmospheric flight. These concepts involved using powerful electromagnetic fields to accelerate ionized gases, creating thrust without the need for conventional fuel combustion. The theoretical advantages were significant, as plasma systems could potentially operate across a much wider range of speeds and altitudes than any chemical propulsion system. Research into plasma propulsion at Groom Lake allegedly began in the early 1980s, building on advances in magnetic field generation and high-voltage electronics. Test vehicles were reportedly equipped with systems that could create controlled plasma fields around their surfaces, potentially reducing drag while providing thrust through electromagnetic acceleration of ionized air molecules. The power requirements for plasma propulsion systems posed significant technical challenges. Generating the electromagnetic fields necessary for effective plasma acceleration required energy sources far more compact and powerful than conventional aircraft systems could provide. This drove research into advanced battery technologies, fuel cells, and even exotic power generation methods that remain classified decades after their development. Patent filings from aerospace contractors during this period reveal glimpses of the theoretical work supporting these experimental propulsion programs. Documents describe methods for generating and controlling plasma fields, techniques for electromagnetic field manipulation, and approaches to power generation that seem to anticipate capabilities far beyond what was publicly available at the time. Electroaerodynamic propulsion represented another avenue of research that challenged conventional understanding of flight physics. These systems attempted to generate thrust by creating controlled electrical fields that could accelerate air molecules without physical contact or combustion. The concept suggested that aircraft might eventually achieve flight through purely electrical means, eliminating the need for moving parts or fuel consumption. Testing electroaerodynamic systems required facilities capable of generating and containing extremely high voltages while maintaining precise control over electrical field geometries. The isolation of Groom Lake provided ideal conditions for such experiments, as the risk of electromagnetic interference with civilian systems was minimal, and the security environment prevented unauthorized observation of potentially revolutionary technologies. Anti-gravity research, while often dismissed as science fiction by mainstream physics, reportedly received serious investigation at classified facilities during the Cold War era. Theoretical physicists explored concepts involving the manipulation of gravitational fields, time-space distortion effects, and other exotic phenomena that might enable revolutionary flight capabilities. Documents released through Freedom of Information Act requests have revealed government funding for research into gravitational field manipulation, although the specific results of these programs remain heavily classified. Former contractors have described experiments involving the measurement of extremely small gravitational effects and attempts to generate controllable gravitational fields using various electromagnetic and nuclear techniques. The connection between propulsion research and materials science drove parallel programs investigating metamaterials with unusual electromagnetic properties. These artificial materials, engineered at microscopic scales, could potentially manipulate electromagnetic fields in ways that natural materials cannot, opening possibilities for propulsion systems based on electromagnetic field control rather than conventional thrust generation. Nuclear-powered aircraft engines represented another exotic propulsion concept that received serious development attention during the Cold War. The theoretical advantages were obvious, as nuclear power could provide virtually unlimited flight duration and the ability to operate at extreme altitudes where conventional engines could not function. However, the radiation shielding and safety challenges made such systems extremely difficult to develop and test safely. Research into nuclear thermal propulsion allegedly continued at Groom Lake well into the 1980s, focusing on reactor designs that could safely heat working fluids to temperatures high enough for efficient thrust generation. The remote location and comprehensive security apparatus made the facility ideal for experiments involving radioactive materials and nuclear reactor operation. Magnetic field propulsion concepts explored the possibility of using powerful electromagnets to interact with the Earth's magnetic field or with artificially generated magnetic fields to achieve controlled flight. While the Earth's magnetic field is relatively weak, theoretical calculations suggested that sufficiently powerful electromagnetic systems might be able to generate measurable propulsive effects. The energy storage technologies required for these exotic propulsion systems drove research into superconducting materials, advanced capacitor systems, and novel approaches to electrical energy storage that could provide the power densities needed for practical flight applications. These supporting technologies often proved as challenging to develop as the propulsion systems themselves. Testing procedures for experimental propulsion systems required new approaches to flight evaluation, as conventional aircraft instrumentation was inadequate for measuring the forces and effects generated by electromagnetic propulsion methods. Specialized sensors, data recording systems, and analysis techniques had to be developed specifically for these programs. The classification levels applied to exotic propulsion research were reportedly among the highest in the defense establishment, with access limited to personnel with specialized clearances and demonstrated need to know. This compartmentalization meant that even within Groom Lake, most personnel were unaware of the full scope of propulsion research activities. International implications of breakthrough propulsion technologies would be profound, as nations possessing such capabilities would gain overwhelming strategic advantages in both military and commercial aviation. The potential for disrupting existing aerospace industries and military balance of power ensured that successful exotic propulsion programs would remain classified for decades beyond their initial development. Whether these exotic propulsion programs achieved practical breakthroughs or remained confined to theoretical research continues to be debated among aerospace researchers and intelligence analysts. The fragmentary evidence suggests serious investigation of revolutionary concepts, but the lack of operational systems incorporating such technologies raises questions about their ultimate success or current status. Chapter 12. The Disinformation Campaign. In the shadowy world of intelligence operations, truth and deception often become so intertwined that even those orchestrating the confusion lose track of where reality ends and manufactured mythology begins. At Area 51, this blurring of fact and fiction may have been not an accident, but a carefully crafted strategy designed to protect the facility's most sensitive programs by encouraging the very speculation that officials publicly dismissed. The concept of using UFO mythology as a cover for classified aircraft testing was not born from desperation, but from cold strategic calculation. Intelligence analysts recognized early on that public fascination with extraterrestrial visitors could provide perfect camouflage for experimental aircraft that looked and performed unlike anything in the conventional inventory. If witnesses reported seeing strange craft performing impossible maneuvers, it was far better to have them dismissed as UFO enthusiasts than taken seriously as observers of classified military technology. The timing of this strategy coincided perfectly with the emergence of modern UFO culture in the 1950s. The same period that saw the development of the U-2 spy plane also witnessed a surge in flying saucer reports across the American Southwest. Intelligence officials quickly realized that these two phenomena could be linked to their advantage, allowing unusual aircraft sightings to be explained away as misidentified natural phenomena or the products of overactive imaginations influenced by science fiction. Documents declassified decades later revealed the extent to which intelligence agencies actively cultivated UFO speculation as a counterintelligence tool. Project Blue Book, the Air Force's official UFO investigation program, served multiple purposes beyond simply cataloguing unexplained sightings. It provided a mechanism for monitoring public awareness of classified aircraft programs while simultaneously directing attention away from legitimate security concerns. The psychological profile of UFO believers made them ideal unwitting allies in protecting classified programs. Their enthusiasm for extraterrestrial explanations meant they were unlikely to consider more mundane possibilities, like experimental aircraft testing. Their tendency toward elaborate conspiracy theories actually helped obscure real conspiracies by burying factual observations beneath layers of speculation about alien visitation and government cover-ups. Intelligence operatives discovered that the most effective disinformation campaigns required minimal, direct intervention. By simply allowing UFO speculation to flourish without official contradiction, they could rely on the UFO community itself to generate increasingly complex theories that moved further and further from any resemblance to actual classified programs. The community's own tendency toward sensationalism and internal competition for attention ensured that factual observations would be quickly overwhelmed by more dramatic but fictional elaborations. The Bob Lazar case represents perhaps the most sophisticated example of this strategy in action. Whether Lazar was a genuine whistleblower, a deliberate disinformation agent, or simply a fabricator seeking attention, his story served intelligence interests perfectly by focusing public attention on exotic alien technology rather than conventional advanced aircraft development. His claims were simultaneously specific enough to seem credible to believers and fantastic enough to be dismissed by skeptics. Media manipulation became a crucial component of the disinformation strategy. Intelligence agencies cultivated relationships with journalists, filmmakers, and authors who could be counted on to present UFO stories in ways that served operational security interests. This didn't require direct control of media content, merely the ability to influence how certain stories were framed and which sources received the most attention. The entertainment industry proved especially valuable in this regard. Science fiction films and television programs featuring flying saucers and alien visitors helped establish cultural expectations that made witness reports of unusual aircraft more likely to be interpreted as extraterrestrial encounters, rather than classified technology demonstrations. The circular relationship between entertainment media and UFO reports created a self-reinforcing cycle that benefited intelligence security operations. Academic researchers studying UFO phenomena found themselves inadvertently serving intelligence interests by focusing their investigations on extraterrestrial hypotheses rather than terrestrial technology development. The academic community's general skepticism toward UFO claims meant that legitimate observations of classified aircraft were often dismissed, along with obviously fictional accounts, providing additional protection for sensitive programs. The international dimensions of UFO disinformation campaigns extended the strategy beyond simple protection of American classified programs. Foreign intelligence agencies attempting to gather information about American aerospace developments found their efforts complicated by the noise generated by UFO speculation. Separating factual intelligence from UFO mythology became a significant challenge for adversary intelligence organizations. Counterintelligence benefits of UFO mythology extended to recruitment and penetration operations. Foreign agents attempting to infiltrate American aerospace programs could find their legitimate intelligence gathering efforts confused with UFO research activities. This provided opportunities for American counterintelligence agencies to identify and monitor potential foreign operatives, while simultaneously feeding them disinformation disguised as UFO-related intelligence. The psychological warfare aspects of UFO disinformation proved effective beyond their original security purposes. The association of advanced aerospace technology with extraterrestrial origins helped maintain American strategic ambiguity about actual technological capabilities. Adversary nations could never be certain whether reported UFO sightings represented genuine alien encounters, advanced American technology, or elaborate deception operations. Scientific research into anomalous aerospace phenomena was systematically discouraged or redirected away from areas that might compromise classified programs. Researchers who showed too much interest in the technical aspects of UFO reports found their funding reduced or their access to relevant data restricted. This ensured that legitimate scientific investigation would not accidentally uncover classified technology development activities. The evolution of UFO mythology over time has continued to serve intelligence interests by adapting to changing technological realities and security requirements. As new aircraft designs and propulsion concepts have been developed, corresponding changes in UFO folklore have helped maintain the cover provided by extraterrestrial explanations for unusual aerospace phenomena. Quality control of disinformation required careful monitoring of UFO research communities to ensure that speculation remained focused on extraterrestrial rather than terrestrial explanations. When researchers came too close to accurate assessments of classified programs, subtle interventions could redirect their attention toward more exotic but less accurate theories about alien technology and government conspiracies. The success of UFO disinformation campaigns created unexpected long-term consequences for intelligence agencies. The mythology became so pervasive and self-sustaining that it began to influence public expectations and political discussions about government secrecy in ways that sometimes worked against intelligence interests. The culture of suspicion, fostered by UFO conspiracy theories, occasionally focused unwanted attention on legitimate classified programs. Training programs for intelligence personnel included instruction on managing UFO-related inquiries and maintaining appropriate cover stories that neither confirmed nor denied extraterrestrial explanations while protecting classified information. Personnel assigned to facilities like Groom Lake were specifically briefed on how to respond to questions about UFO sightings without compromising operational security. The digital age has complicated UFO disinformation strategies by making information more difficult to control and by enabling rapid communication among UFO research communities. However, the same technologies have also provided new opportunities for sophisticated disinformation campaigns that can reach larger audiences and create more convincing false evidence than was possible during earlier decades. Evaluation of the long-term effectiveness of UFO disinformation campaigns reveals both successes and unintended consequences. While these strategies successfully protected classified aerospace programs for decades, they also contributed to public cynicism about government statements and created political pressures for greater transparency that sometimes work against intelligence interests. The balance between security, protection, and public trust remains a continuing challenge for intelligence agencies operating in democratic societies. Chapter 13: Satellite Surveillance and Counterintelligence. Above the Nevada desert, in the silent vacuum of space, an invisible war has been waged for decades between the eyes in the sky and the secrets on the ground. Foreign intelligence satellites, orbiting at altitudes of several hundred miles, have trained their sophisticated cameras and sensors on Groom Lake with persistent determination, while the facility's security apparatus has evolved equally sophisticated methods of concealment and misdirection. This ongoing battle between surveillance and counter-surveillance represents one of the most technically advanced aspects of modern espionage. The threat from overhead observation became apparent to Area 51 security planners in the early 1960s, when the Soviet Union began launching reconnaissance satellites capable of photographing ground targets with resolution measured in feet rather than miles. These early satellites, while primitive by contemporary standards, could clearly identify aircraft on runways, new construction projects, and unusual activity patterns that might reveal classified program details. The orbital mechanics of satellite surveillance created both vulnerabilities and opportunities for the base's security operations. Reconnaissance satellites follow predictable paths that can be calculated with mathematical precision, creating windows of opportunity when no hostile satellites are overhead. During these gaps, lasting anywhere from minutes to hours depending on orbital configurations, sensitive activities could be conducted with reduced risk of overhead observation. Scheduling of flight operations around satellite passages became a complex logistical challenge requiring precise coordination between multiple agencies. Intelligence analysts tracked the orbits of known foreign reconnaissance satellites, calculated their ground coverage patterns, and provided Groom Lake operations personnel with detailed schedules indicating when different areas of the base would be under observation and when they would be clear for sensitive activities. Weather conditions provided additional complications and opportunities for evading satellite surveillance. Cloud cover could effectively blind optical reconnaissance satellites, but the unpredictable nature of desert weather made it impossible to rely on natural concealment for planned operations. However, when cloud formations did provide cover during critical test flights or equipment movements, operations personnel were prepared to take advantage of these opportunities on short notice. The development of camouflage and concealment techniques at Groom Lake pushed the boundaries of materials, science, and optical engineering. Aircraft hangars were designed with roof configurations that minimized shadows and heat signatures visible from orbital altitudes. Specialized coatings were applied to building surfaces to reduce their contrast against the natural desert background when viewed from above. Mobile camouflage systems allowed sensitive equipment and aircraft to be concealed rapidly when satellite passages were imminent. These systems included inflatable decoy structures, movable screens, and even elaborate stage sets designed to present misleading visual information to overhead observers. The goal was not necessarily to hide all activity, but to prevent foreign intelligence analysts from drawing accurate conclusions about the nature and scale of operations at the facility. Heat signature management became increasingly important as infrared sensing capabilities improved throughout the 1970s and 80s. Aircraft engines, industrial equipment, and even human activity generated thermal signatures that could be detected by sophisticated sensors aboard intelligent satellites. Cooling systems, heat dispersal techniques, and scheduling adjustments helped minimize the thermal signatures that might reveal sensitive activities. Electronic countermeasures extended satellite surveillance evasion into the electromagnetic spectrum. Communications security protocols prevented foreign satellites from intercepting radio transmissions that might reveal operational details. Radar emissions were carefully controlled to avoid providing intelligence about aircraft performance characteristics or flight test activities. The arms race between satellite surveillance and ground-based concealment drove rapid technological advancement on both sides. As satellite sensors became more sophisticated and capable of higher resolution imaging, countermeasures evolved to address new detection capabilities. The development of synthetic aperture radar satellites, capable of imaging through cloud cover and at night, required entirely new approaches to concealment that went beyond visual camouflage. Decoy operations became an important component of counter-satellite intelligence activities. False aircraft movements, dummy construction projects, and staged activities were designed to mislead foreign intelligence analysts about the true nature and timing of classified programs. These deception operations required careful planning to ensure they appeared credible to satellite observation while protecting the actual secrets they were designed to conceal. The proliferation of commercial satellite imagery in the 1990s created new challenges for maintaining operational security at Area 51. Unlike military reconnaissance satellites controlled by hostile governments, commercial imaging satellites could be accessed by private researchers, journalists, and foreign intelligence agencies operating through third-party organizations. This democratization of satellite surveillance capabilities required broader and more sophisticated concealment efforts. Real-time satellite tracking systems were developed to provide immediate warnings when reconnaissance satellites were approaching overhead. These systems allowed operations personnel to implement rapid concealment procedures, halt sensitive activities, or move equipment into protected areas with minimal advance notice. The ability to respond quickly to changing satellite surveillance threats became essential for maintaining operational security. Underground facilities represented the ultimate solution to satellite surveillance challenges. Activities conducted entirely below ground level were effectively invisible to overhead observation, regardless of sensor sophistication or orbital configurations. The extensive underground construction allegedly undertaken at Groom Lake can be understood partly as a response to the persistent and improving threat of satellite reconnaissance. deception techniques extended to the construction and modification of surface facilities designed to mislead satellite analysts about their true purpose. Buildings were constructed with misleading proportions, false equipment installations, and architectural features designed to suggest functions different from their actual use. These physical deception measures required sophisticated understanding of how foreign intelligence analysts interpreted satellite imagery. The timing of major construction projects was coordinated with satellite surveillance schedules to minimize foreign intelligence awareness of new capabilities being developed at the facility. Construction equipment was moved during periods of minimal satellite coverage, and building activities were scheduled to present misleading visual information about project timelines and objectives. Coordination with other government agencies became essential for effective counter-satellite operations. The National Reconnaissance Office, responsible for American satellite surveillance programs, provided detailed intelligence about foreign satellite capabilities and limitations. This information allowed Groom Lake security personnel to tailor their concealment efforts to address specific threats posed by different types of reconnaissance systems. The psychological aspects of satellite surveillance created additional considerations for personnel operating at the facility. The knowledge that hostile intelligence satellites might be overhead at any moment required constant awareness of operational security requirements. Personnel were trained to recognize satellite passage times and automatically adjust their activities to minimize intelligence disclosure risks. International legal frameworks governing satellite surveillance created complex environments for counterintelligence operations. While reconnaissance satellites operating in international airspace could not be directly interfered with, their effectiveness could be reduced through passive measures that did not violate international law. This legal constraint required sophisticated approaches to satellite surveillance countermeasures. Advanced materials research supported the development of increasingly sophisticated camouflage and concealment systems. Adaptive camouflage that could adjust its appearance in response to changing lighting conditions. Metamaterials that could manipulate electromagnetic signatures, and other exotic concealment technologies were reportedly tested at facilities like Groom Lake. The future of satellite surveillance and counter-surveillance continues to evolve as new technologies emerge on both sides of the intelligence equation. Hyperspectral imaging, artificial intelligence-enhanced analysis, and constellation surveillance systems promise to make overhead reconnaissance even more capable, while quantum encryption, active camouflage, and other advanced countermeasures offer new possibilities for protecting classified operations from space-based observation. The cat-and-mouse game between satellites and secrets represents one of the most technologically sophisticated aspects of modern intelligence competition, with Area 51 serving as both a target of foreign surveillance efforts and a laboratory for developing the most advanced concealment technologies available to protect America's most sensitive aerospace programs from the deep past, unblinking eyes orbiting overhead. Chapter 14. The Next Generation of Black Projects. The runways of Groom Lake stretch toward a horizon that holds secrets the world may not see for decades to come. While the public debates the legacy of stealth fighters and hypersonic aircraft from past generations, new construction projects visible in satellite imagery hint at programs that could reshape the future of aerospace technology. The question that lingers in the desert air is not what was tested here in previous decades, but what revolutionary capabilities are taking shape in the shadows of today's classified world. Recent satellite imagery reveals expansion activities at Area 51, the that suggest preparation for aircraft unlike anything currently in the public inventory. New hangars have appeared, their dimensions calculated not for existing aircraft types, but for platforms with wingspans and storage requirements that exceed conventional military designs. The proportions suggest vehicles designed for missions that current aircraft cannot perform, whether in terms of range, altitude, or operational environment. Construction of what appears to be an extended runway system has proceeded in phases over the past decade, with sections completed during periods of minimal satellite coverage and then connected into a continuous surface capable of supporting aircraft with landing and takeoff requirements far beyond existing designs. The new runway configuration suggests aircraft that might need longer distances for ground operations or alternative approach patterns that differ from conventional flight profiles. Power infrastructure improvements visible from overhead indicate electrical capacity increases that seem disproportionate to the facility's apparent surface activities. New transformer installations, underground cable routing, and what appear to be redundant power generation facilities suggest energy requirements for programs that demand substantial electrical power, whether for manufacturing processes, testing equipment, or operational systems that require continuous high-power input. Sixth-generation fighter development represents one possibility for the new construction activities. These aircraft would incorporate artificial intelligence systems, advanced stealth capabilities, and weapons technologies that require testing facilities different from those used for previous generation programs. The integration of autonomous systems and network connectivity would necessitate new types of ground support equipment and testing infrastructure. Space access vehicles present another potential explanation for the facility modifications. As military operations extend into orbital environments, the need for aircraft capable of transitioning between atmospheric and spaceflight would drive requirements for testing facilities adapted to hybrid aerospace and space vehicle operations. Such aircraft would require unique ground support systems and operational procedures different from conventional atmospheric aircraft. Hypersonic weapons delivery systems under development would require testing facilities capable of supporting vehicles that operate at the extreme edges of atmospheric flight. These systems would need specialized launch and recovery equipment, unique fuel handling capabilities, and testing instrumentation designed for flight regimes that few facilities are equipped to support. Directed energy weapons research may explain some of the substantial power infrastructure improvements visible at the facility. High-energy laser systems, particle beam weapons, or electromagnetic pulse devices would require power generation and control systems far exceeding conventional aircraft requirements. Testing such systems would necessitate specialized facilities designed to contain and measure electromagnetic emissions. Advanced materials research continues to drive requirements for new types of testing facilities. Metamaterials, programmable matter, and self-repairing structures under development would require manufacturing and testing capabilities that differ substantially from conventional aerospace materials processing. The chemical and environmental controls needed for exotic materials work would explain some of the new construction activities. Artificial intelligence integration in aerospace systems represents a revolutionary change that would require extensive ground testing before flight operations. AI systems capable of autonomous mission planning, threat assessment, and tactical decision-making would need sophisticated simulation facilities and testing environments that might account for substantial new construction at classified facilities. Propulsion system development continues to push boundaries beyond conventional chemical rockets and jet engines, whether involving plasma propulsion, electromagnetic acceleration, or even more exotic concepts. New propulsion technologies would require testing facilities designed for energy densities and operational parameters that existing infrastructure cannot support. Unmanned systems development has evolved towards swarm coordination and distributed operations that would require new types of testing and evaluation facilities. Large numbers of coordinated autonomous vehicles operating together would need specialized ground control systems and data processing capabilities that might explain some of the facility expansion. Quantum technology applications in aerospace systems could drive requirements for facilities equipped with specialized environmental controls and electromagnetic shielding. Quantum sensors, communication systems, and computing applications would need testing environments that protect quantum systems from interference while allowing evaluation of their performance in aerospace applications. Biological integration research, while controversial, might explain some construction activities if military planners are exploring biomechanical hybrid systems or brain-computer interfaces for pilot augmentation. Such research would require specialized laboratory facilities and containment systems designed for both biological and technological research activities. International competitive pressures ensure that American aerospace development continues to push technological boundaries to maintain strategic advantages over potential adversaries. The rapid advancement of foreign aerospace capabilities creates requirements for American systems that exceed current technological limits, driving development programs that require the most advanced testing facilities available. Manufacturing technology integration increasingly requires co-location of research, development, and production facilities to accelerate the transition from prototype to operational systems. Advanced manufacturing techniques like additive manufacturing of entire aircraft structures or automated assembly systems would require new types of production facilities. Environmental testing capabilities for extreme conditions continue to evolve as military operations extend into new domains and environments. Testing facilities capable of simulating space conditions, extreme atmospheric environments, or electromagnetic warfare conditions would require specialized construction that differs from conventional aerospace testing infrastructure. Data processing requirements for modern aerospace systems drive needs for computing facilities capable of handling massive amounts of sensor data, simulation information, and artificial intelligence processing loads. The computational requirements for advanced aerospace development might explain substantial electrical infrastructure improvements. Timeline projections based on historical Black project development cycles suggest that programs beginning today might not be revealed to the public until the 2040s or 2050s. The aircraft taking shape in current classified programs may not become visible until international situations or technological competition forces their disclosure. Personnel expansion to support new programs would require additional housing, transportation, and support facilities beyond those currently visible at Area 51. The human infrastructure needed to support revolutionary aerospace programs represents a substantial logistical challenge that might drive some of the construction activities visible in satellite imagery. The legacy of Area 51 as a testing ground for revolutionary aerospace technology ensures that whatever programs are currently under development there, they likely represent capabilities that will seem as impossible to contemporary observers as stealth technology seemed to witnesses in the 1970s. The facility's mission continues to evolve toward challenges that push the boundaries of human technological achievement into realms that remain hidden behind classification barriers and the endless expanse of the Nevada desert. Chapter 15: Legacy of Secrecy. As the sun sets behind the mountains surrounding Groom Lake, casting long shadows across runways that have witnessed some of the most remarkable achievements in aviation history, the legacy of Area 51 extends far beyond the classified aircraft that have taken flight from its remote desert location. This facility, born from the necessities of Cold War competition and sustained by the ongoing demands of national security, has fundamentally shaped how democratic societies balance the competing needs of public transparency and military secrecy. The aviation breakthroughs achieved at Area 51 represent more than technological advancement. They demonstrate humanity's capacity to push beyond perceived limitations when necessity, resources, and exceptional talent converge in an environment free from conventional constraints. The U-2 proved that aircraft could operate in the stratosphere with capabilities that seemed impossible to earlier generations of engineers. The A-12 demonstrated that atmospheric flight could approach the theoretical limits of speed and altitude. Stealth technology showed that radar detection, once considered an immutable fact of military aviation, could be overcome through revolutionary approaches to aircraft design. These achievements came at significant cost, measured not just in financial resources, but in human sacrifice. Test pilots risked their lives flying experimental aircraft that operated beyond the boundaries of known flight envelopes. Engineers and technicians spent careers developing technologies whose contributions to human knowledge might never receive public recognition. Families endured the stress of secrecy, living with spouses and parents whose daily work could never be discussed or acknowledged. The psychological impact of prolonged secrecy on those who worked within the classified world of Groom Lake created a unique subculture bound by shared experiences that could not be shared with the outside world. This community developed its own codes of conduct, support systems, and methods for coping with the isolation that classification requirements imposed. The bonds formed among personnel who shared extraordinary experiences in secret proved remarkably durable, lasting decades beyond the completion of specific programs. Public perception of government secrecy was fundamentally altered by the mystery surrounding Area 51. The facility became a symbol of hidden government activities that sparked broader questions about democratic accountability and the limits of classification. UFO speculation, whether genuine or manufactured, focused public attention on the facility in ways that conventional military bases never experienced. This attention created both challenges and opportunities for intelligence agencies managing public understanding of classified programs. The emergence of satellite imagery and internet communication transformed the relationship between classified facilities and public knowledge. Commercial satellite providers made overhead imagery of Area 51 available to anyone with internet access, ending the government's ability to deny the facility's existence while maintaining classification of its activities. Online communities analyzing satellite images created new forms of intelligence gathering that complemented traditional espionage activities. Popular culture embraced Area 51 as a symbol that transcended its actual military functions. The facility appeared in countless films, television programs, books, and video games as shorthand for government conspiracy and hidden technology. This cultural significance created a feedback loop where fictional portrayals influenced public expectations about the facility's real activities, while actual secrecy provided material for entertainment industry speculation. The scientific community's relationship with Area 51 reflected broader tensions between open research and classified development. Many of the aerospace advances achieved at the facility built upon fundamental research conducted in universities and private laboratories, yet the classification requirements prevented feedback that might have accelerated broader scientific progress. This one-way flow of information from open research to classified application created inefficiencies in the scientific process while protecting military advantages. International relations were affected by the facility's reputation in ways that extended beyond its actual intelligence-gathering activities. Foreign governments had to consider the possibility that American aerospace capabilities exceeded publicly known limits, creating uncertainty in strategic planning that served American interests, regardless of whether specific classified programs achieved their technical objectives. The mystery itself became a strategic asset that complicated adversary decision-making processes. The legal frameworks governing classified facilities like Area 51 evolved in response to changing technological and social conditions. Freedom of Information Act procedures, congressional oversight mechanisms, and court cases involving classification disputes were all influenced by public interest in the facility's activities. These legal developments affected not just Area 51, but the broader system of government secrecy and democratic accountability. Economic impacts of classified aerospace programs extended far beyond the direct costs of aircraft development. Technological advances achieved under classification eventually found applications in civilian aviation, defense contracting, and related industries. The economic value of these spillover effects often exceeded the original program costs, but the classification requirements made it difficult to measure or publicize these broader benefits. Educational implications of classified aerospace development included both the training of personnel for classified programs and the limitation of knowledge transfer to academic institutions. Universities with aerospace engineering programs found themselves preparing students for careers in classified industries while being unable to access or teach the most advanced technologies their graduates would encounter. This created educational gaps that affected the broader aerospace workforce. Environmental consequences of decades of classified aircraft testing at Area 51 included both the direct impacts of flight operations and the broader effects of industrial activities in the Nevada desert. The facility's remote location provided environmental protection through isolation, but also raised questions about long-term environmental monitoring and remediation that were complicated by classification requirements. Technological obsolescence affected classified programs just as it influenced civilian aerospace development. Aircraft that represented revolutionary advances when first tested eventually became outdated as new technologies emerged. The classification systems that protected these advances had to adapt to changing technological realities while maintaining security for programs that remained sensitive decades after their initial development. Workforce development for classified aerospace programs required specialized training and security procedures that differed from civilian aerospace employment. Personnel recruited for classified work had to adapt to compartmentalized information sharing, lifetime secrecy obligations, and career limitations that prevented them from discussing their most significant professional achievements. These factors influenced recruitment, retention, and job satisfaction in ways that affected program effectiveness. Future challenges for facilities like Area 51 include adapting to changing threats, emerging technologies, and evolving public expectations about government transparency. The proliferation of commercial satellite imagery, advances in signal intelligence collection, and the emergence of new aerospace technologies will require continued evolution of security procedures and operational practices. The ultimate legacy of Area 51 may be its demonstration that democratic societies can maintain essential military secrets while preserving the fundamental openness that characterizes democratic governance. The facility's history illustrates both the necessity of classification for protecting national security and the importance of eventual disclosure for maintaining public trust. The balance between these competing requirements continues to evolve as technology advances and social expectations change. As new generations of classified programs begin development in the Nevada desert, they build upon foundations laid by previous generations of engineers, pilots, and security personnel who proved that extraordinary achievements are possible when talented individuals work together toward common goals, even when their contributions must remain hidden from the world they serve. The secrets of today may someday become the acknowledged history of tomorrow, continuing the cycle of classified development and eventual disclosure that has characterized Area 51 since its establishment in the Nevada desert more than half a century ago. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the classified corridors of Groom Lake.